This update is a serious relief to Toronto Raptors fans, as over the course of this preseason, it felt like the injury bug was creeping its way back into the Raptors locker room, but that doesn't seem to be the case with this latest update. So we'll break that down, including some insights in terms of the Raptors' next move heading into this year, and an ex-Toronto Raptor making some very interesting comments regarding his time with the team. So lots of stuff to break down out here in this vid. But before we do, folks, appreciate all the support we can get with the season just around the corner. I'm in Toronto right now, ready for this Blue Jays action, the ALCS. But if you guys don't want to miss, obviously, the Raptors news, it's coming around the corner. Make sure you guys hit that subscribe button. Still 53% of our viewers have not hit that sub button just yet. I don't want you to miss a single thing. So hit that subscribe button. But let's dive into it, because there's a lot of stuff we got to talk about. The first one's going to be a little fun one, because Thaddeus Young, ex-Toronto Raptor, came out and dropped some perspective in regards to his tenure with the Raptors. Now, it's no significant crazy thing to hear former Raptors say some interesting things about their time, their tenure, but this one, I thought this quote was very, very interesting, as basically he came out and said, talked about his time and said, hey, the Raptors, they let Fred, Pascal, and OG go. When I was there, they was having Fred VanVleet stand in the corner and putting the ball in Scottie Barnes' hands. And, Scottie's got to come with it this year. Talking about Scottie Barnes, and this was a huge point of contention when, the Raptors had that sort of young timeline and old timeline with Fred VanVleet, Pascal, and all those guys, and Scottie Barnes in the younger group. What direction were they going? Are they going to win, lose? What was the plan there? And this quote made it feel like, okay, what were they actually mad about? Because we heard about the disconnect between Nick Nurse with the vets and then the young guys and what the front office was looking for. And obviously the veterans felt like Fred VanVleet wasn't getting utilized the right way, and Scottie Barnes, they're putting too much of an emphasis out there in the young youth and development when they thought they had a very, very talented roster, which frankly, I agree that there was a lot of talent on that Toronto Raptors group, even though it didn't end up leading to a ton of winning. But I digress. The Raptors were in an interesting spot, and Thaddeus Young coming out and talking about Fred VanVleet. Now, that had Twitter, that had a lot of people fired up and clapping back at Thaddeus Young, because frankly, Fred was a pretty high usage player. Anyone that watched the Raptors could see that. He took a lot of shots, was the engine of the offense, and RTO-wise, Scottie Barnes, I believe I'm getting the Twitter name right, but took a screenshot of this from Basketball Reference, and that season, usage rate, of course, at Milano Bandit's a much smaller sample size, but Scottie Barnes had a lower usage than Gary Trent Jr., Fred VanVleet, as well as Pascal Siakam. Now, you can make arguments as the season went along, things adjusted, this is Scottie's rookie year, all that type of stuff, but doesn't put a lot of credence to the argument that Thaddeus Young, probably echoing the sentiments of Fred and the older guys and Nick Nurse there at that point. I don't really align with it, but it's interesting to see Twitter get fired up over there with Thaddeus Young. I'm still a fan of Thaddeus Young, and people are bringing up clips of them going back and forth. I like that. I liked his time here, and we'll see how things play out. But that's not the only thing we're taking a look at, because, of course, we do have some very, very important updates regarding this team, especially Collin Murray-Boyles, who has looked very good out there in preseason, looking like the guy that, people were shocked when we selected him with number 9th overall pick. Showing why Bobby Webster, of course, Masai Ujiri, who was still there at the time, are elite in regards to their scouting. And Collin Murray-Boyles has looked good in preseason, but he went down with an injury out there in, the first preseason game. As Murray-Boyles, this is released during the game, he will not return for the second half after having a bruised right elbow. He had 4 points and 3 shots, a rebound, and an assist in 8 minutes. So obviously, you don't know anything in the time. What's going on? What happened? And we got an update essentially revealing that the x-rays on CMB were negative, and it said his elbow really started bothering him after the adrenaline wore off. He doesn't know how it happened and wouldn't be surprised if an MRI is next. So the x-rays were negative, but he's still dealing with discomfort. It's not like, a bruise or a stinger and they're just being extra cautious. There is some actual pain. There is some actual stuff going on. And then we got this update regarding that, he's not at practice today. Instead was getting further testing on his elbow, and Jakob Poeltl also is out, but he's recovering from a cold. Now, again, we're not in the clear yet. We're not out of the woods in terms of the CMB injury update, but it is a serious relief to know that the x-rays came back negative, that there isn't a clear immediate break and all that stuff, because we've seen it in just last year, right? Rookies coming in where the start of their career, getting training camp, getting these preseason reps, getting all this stuff is so important, so crucial for their development in their early Raptors careers, in their early NBA careers. And having this guy go down with injury so early, I mean, he rolled his ankle out there in game 1 of preseason, came back in. Obviously, he's dealing with this weird elbow thing here now. Hearing the x-rays are negative and, at least some positive news regarding the situation is very, very encouraging, but we are very, very hopeful that CMB is not going to be out or miss time out there in the regular season, because of course this is crucial time for a guy to develop, but much less this guy's been impactful, right? And we look at the Raptors roster here now at this point. Of course, we have Mamu, but Mamu looks more like the 4 and CMB looks more like the 5 when they're out there in the backup units. Of course, you have Mobo, who did look very good out there in the most recent preseason game. Of course, you have Sham Shea, who is still dealing with an injury of his own. So, CMB, the Raptors can't hold their own, can be fine without CMB in the early goings, but Collin Murray-Boyles is facilitating his defense, his switchability, and, his finishing around the rim. He looks like, forget the development stuff, he looks like he's going to be someone right away that is going to be an impact player for this Raptors group. And you'd hate to see something like what happened with Jakob Poeltl, where it felt like the entire first half of his season was taken away because he dealt with an injury during training camp. He came back, got hurt again. It was just a complete mess to his start of the year. Of course, things came together in the second half of the year, the benefit of the Raptors, going down that tanking route. So that is not the ideal path for a rookie to come in and get their feet wet out there in the NBA. So hopefully the best here. And the other encouraging thing on that note is that Jakob Poeltl is just out as he recovers from a cold. I mean, if you're going to get an injury update, you're hoping that it's someone having a cold or a flu or something like that, and they're able to bounce back pretty quick. So wishing the best to the Raptors, hoping this season we get better luck with the injuries. But we also had some interesting quotes come out from the Raptors staff, players, and some insights in terms of the Raptors' next moves. So let's hear the quotes. Firstly, Darko Rajaković came out and said, and the whole game, even in the first half, the thought was it was a good fight. We made a couple of execution mistakes. We missed a lot of open shots, but we stayed in the game and stayed together. And that's exactly what you want to see from a young group coming out and playing intensity. And that's what we were promised this entire offseason. It's why I titled the video last night. This team is different because they don't give up. They're locked in. We saw it in Summer League. They are going to bring the toughness, the intensity 24/7. And, we had that energy, that motivation, the entire tenure over Darko's, coaching tenure with the Toronto Raptors. But of course, the Raptors would end up having the fake comebacks. They'd lose at the end of the games. They pulled their starters, of course, with the goal in mind of landing a player the caliber of a CMB out there in the NBA draft. But now they're locked in and focused and ready to go. But we, in terms of moves, this game last night was a huge emphasis on getting some run for the fringe back end of the roster, who's going to actually get minutes and who's going to play. And of course, AJ Lawson is one of the more important pieces that we have to make a decision on heading into the actual regular season. And he had a quote in regards to his whole situation and stuff that's going on. Essentially, AJ Lawson, Michael Grange revealed some details on this note, saying that Lawson has fans on the Raptors and coaching staff throughout the organization. He's appreciated the pace he plays. He's appreciative for the pace that he plays at, and offensively and defensively, and the demeanor he brings to the locker room, where he's built strong relationships with his teammates after joining his hometown team midway through last year. So he's the guy that everyone's pointing to in terms of, hey, if we're going to give the final roster to someone, it should be to AJ Lawson. And I contend with that. Of course, he's not getting a ton of run, but if the Raptors do deal with injuries the way that they have in seasons past, again, this whole video is kind of, let's hope that's not happening. The signs are indicating that's not going to be the case, but he's a good insurance piece to have on this group. As a 15-man, you're not going to get that much better. We can figure out the cap flexibility if this team isn't great out there at the end of the season, but I trust Bobby Webster to handle that. Don't let an asset like AJ Lawson walk for the bargain of a price. You can actually keep him on. So that's my take. That's what the quotes are for there. But he does have his fans within the organization, has great relationships. So that's, of course, an indication that he will be staying on the Raptors. So let me know what you guys think about all this in the comment section down below. You guys the best thing as far as subscribe to the channel if you guys haven't already. Anyways, I'm signing out. Cheers.